Did you know that this channel survives on user submissions of stories? Well, it does. So if you have a true scary story to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I awoke that morning expecting an uneventful day. My older brother was driving into town from college to spend a bit of quality time with me. No big plans. When he arrived, we grabbed a snack, caught up on family news, and generally decided that we would take advantage of a beautiful early October day and take a ride with no specific destination in mind. Little did we know what was to come. Kev drove recklessly fast, a common trait among 19-year-old college dudes. At 16, I was just happy to exhibit a bit of my wild side. I had always been your basic good girl. Without much prompting, I usually towed the line when it came to rules. We were careening down Boston Road in the general direction of the Mass Pike, and who knows from there. The joys and ignorance of being young felt like a vitamin elixir. Windows open, my long hair whipping in my face, laughing over corny jokes, and singing in brother-sister duets to whatever the radio spit out at us. Without explanation, Kev slowed down and gave me a grave look. "I think we're meant to take the next right-hand turn," he said. This might be a great time to tell you that my brother had demonstrated multiple times in his life that he had some indefinable ability to pick up on the paranormal. Not one to be dissuaded, I knew that it would be fruitless to quiz him. So I shrugged and muttered, "Alrighty then." As it turns out, the next right was a barely discernible narrow road, partially hidden by shrub overgrowth on both sides. It didn't look promising to me, and I offered as much. "We'll know when we get there," Kev said enigmatically as he turned on to Silver Street. We both grew quiet as we bumped our way on what seemed to be a once, long ago, paved and very narrow street, now worn down to puddles, potholes, and patches of dirt. Where were we heading? Why had I never noticed this dumb little road in the hundreds of times I'd been on Boston Road? It all felt surreal, somehow. Conversation slipped to silence, and the air around us seemed to cool and grow still. I felt frightened in that vague way one does when the house creaks at night. I swallowed the urge to say, "Let's just turn around," lest my brother look down on me. About 2 miles down Silver Street, the houses began to thin and the trees framing the road rustled warnings that I knew I could not decipher. I hoped it was my imagination playing games with me. Too many Twilight Zone episodes when I was young, I thought. Seemingly, out of nowhere, an approximately 3-high moss-covered stone wall appeared, and Kev instinctively slowed down. "We're getting close," he said. "Close to what?" I managed. Before he could respond, we reached a portion of the stone wall which formed an arch, about 10 feet high and 5 feet wide, tapering down again to another length of stone wall broken only by a driveway that led to a dilapidated, run-down, and clearly vacant house. I knew we were going to enter the driveway before Kev even began to turn the steering wheel. This house was calling to us in every way but words. I have no sixth sense, yet the hair on the back of my neck was tingling. Kev turned off the car and we both got out, silently approaching what was clearly a cement walkway to a side door of the house. There was a single step landing there. On the landing, etched in the cement, was this message: "Rest here a while for me in memory of my 3 children who died." Beneath the message were 3 sets of varying-sized children's footprints. Grief overcame me, a sense of indescribable loss. "If they died, how did she manage to get the imprints?" he murmured. "She. Yes, we both felt it was the mother who'd left the message. How and why? Kev walked in front of me and turned the doorknob. He seemed as surprised as me that the door was unlocked, as if someone had called, "Come on in." We both entered as if we belonged there. Slowly we toured the kitchen and an adjoining summer kitchen, popular in older homes in the New England area. There were a few pots on the counter and some dusty, cracked dishes in the sink. Dishes and pots in an empty old house? It didn't make sense. We continued into the living room. Wallpaper was peeling back like bark off a decrepit tree. Magazines and old newspapers were scattered on the floor. The room was bare except for a single cherry-wood 3-shelf bookcase that stood like a roadblock at the base of the stairway leading to the second floor. And that single piece of furniture was immaculate. No scratches or dust. Kev slid it away with ease, and I began to run up the stairs. "Careful," he shouted. "I don't think it's safe." I was already standing in the middle of the first upstairs bedroom as I heard him slowly making his way up a much shakier-sounding set of stairs than I'd imagined or allowed myself to notice. More torn wallpaper, dirty windows that cast a speckled bit of sunlight on worn wooden floors. Nothing else. In the second bedroom, there was a large chest of drawers. It seemed incongruous that any furniture, the bookshelf downstairs and this dresser, were in this shell of a house at all. I turned to Kev to offer that thought, only to see him pushing at the side of the dresser, struggling, trying to move it. "Help me get it away from the wall," he insisted. Together we pushed and tilted, until finally we had moved it about 2 feet from the wall. We stood side by side, transfixed by what we saw. Fully hidden behind the dresser was how to describe it? Not a closet, nor a cubby. It was a 3-by-4-foot area, clearly built into the house and then hidden by this chest of drawers. Kev leaned in and quickly stepped aside to let me look. There were scratches on the floor. Faintly legible was the shaky printing of the word "help." There were handprints on the wall. Children's handprints. What secrets did this house hold? Children had been hidden in that space, no question about that, we agreed. "We're out of here," my brother had whispered as he half slid down the stairs. I was right behind him as we raced for the car. Kev was speeding in reverse while backing into the street. I felt my fingers claw for the dashboard. If it took us 10 minutes to get from my parents' house to there, it took less than 5 to get home. We were spooked. Nothing felt normal and nothing felt real. We were overwhelmed. My 14-year-old brother James was home, and Kev and I tripped over our syllables, spilling our experience, finishing one another's sentences. "What the hell did we just see?" he asked, uncharacteristically shaken. James, with the bravado of a 14-year-old, was typically unfazed by all of this, and got his kicks ragging on us for being afraid of our own shadows, chickens, and scared of ghosts. "Come on, you morons, take me back there so I can see this freak fest." Any other day, I think Kev or I would have refused. Somehow, without discussing it, we both felt a need to face the Silver Street house again to verify our experience. If James wet his pants, then so much the better. More confident in our destination this time, we doubled back and turned onto Silver Street, postulating about the dresser, the bookshelf, the eerie message, and the footprints in cement. "Almost there," Kev said to James. "Get ready to eat crow." "Here we are," Kev said as the stone wall came into view. The stone archway, the driveway. Kev turned in. There was no house. There was no sign of a house. There was the driveway, the walkway, the landing with the same ominous message, "Rest here a while for me in memory of my 3 children who died." No house meant no door. Whatever door Kev and I had entered was slammed shut. Nothing to see but a slight mound with overgrown grass. "No way," James guffawed. "You two numbskulls got me again." "I wish," Kev said, a tremor in his voice. I was beyond words, beyond belief, stunned and faced with the unexplainable. Everything I've stated is true. We entered a house that didn't exist. We climbed stairs that were not there. We could not explain it then, and decades later, we still have no answers. Eventually, Kev and I did a deep dive into researching the property. We spoke with the neighbors on the street over the next 3 weekends, but nobody recalled a house being present in their time. Though each volunteered, they assumed there must have been one sometime, given the driveway and such. We, unfortunately, shared with friends, each of whom were all too eager to dabble in the mystery. We held a makeshift seance, convinced a medium to come read the site, summoned spirits to come forward. It is foolish and dangerous to open doors when we don't know what's on the other side. We got nothing but tossed from the property at midnight by police, shivers of fright and more haunted by our experience. Over the next year, I admit that we visited the site more often than we should have. I was obsessed. I was compelled to seek worldly answers to an otherworldly experience. My parents began to worry about my brother and me. We knew what they could not know. We had experienced it together. This had been no group psychosis or dual delusion. Knowing what it was not is not the same as understanding what it was. An elderly man who was our town historian suggested that we go to the neighboring town and search the property records for Silver Street. Oh, how I wish I could wrap this up with a bow. We did research. Town records showed there had been a house on that property, hence the stone wall, the archway, the driveway. The same town records indicated that the house had burned down in a tragic fire in 1921. The woman of the house had perished and was found charred on the floor of an upstairs bedroom. Documents indicated that it took several days to locate her 3 dead children. They were found huddled together in death, in the hole in the wall, behind the chest of drawers. After listening to some older stories, I convinced myself that you might be interested in my story from a past vacation that I took. My best friend and I had a project that we had to do about Southeast Asia, and after looking at it so closely, we saw some very beautiful and intriguing places that we wanted to experience firsthand. We worked very hard on an extra assignment where we could win a grant that basically paid for a trip there, and luckily we won. It was supposed to be as a student experience, so we would be documenting what we did, what we learned there, and even had a few specific places we were required to go to. However, there were also places that we wanted to visit as well, so we saved up money and our parents helped us pay the difference. We've traveled to Canada and Ireland before, but this was going to be completely new to us. We were planning on being there for 2 weeks, and it was going to be the most memorable trip we've ever taken. That part was still true, but for a completely different reason. We started our trip in Thailand, and it was incredible. We went to a temple that was beautiful inside and out, and we learned about the Thai royal family. We then visited a temple and took a ferry ride, which was relaxing. That enticed us to later on take a riverboat tour too. One of the last things we did in Thailand was visit a large market. There seemed to be some kind of festival going on. I don't remember what it was, but there were a lot of items being sold promoting it. As we browsed, we tried some different foods that were all fantastic. but we wanted to take this opportunity to bring back some keepsakes and souvenirs. We found some of your normal little knickknacks, but there was one stall in particular that I really liked. There was a little old woman and a very young girl, maybe a granddaughter, sitting behind the booth. The older lady was making something out of what looked like beads and some kind of string. I assumed jewelry because they already had a beautiful display laid out. There were placards and pieces of paper strewn about written in Thai, explaining what some of the pieces were, but I also knew very, very little Thai. I greeted them, and the young girl spoke English and would translate for the older woman. At first, the woman didn't pay us any attention until she saw me picking up her pieces. She stood up and took my hand in hers and said something to the girl. The girl said, "She says you're beautiful, and you both look full of life." I smiled and told her that she looked just as spry and beautiful, which seemed to really perk up the older lady. She told the girl that the pieces were marked down for me, and was suggesting different pieces for both of us, saying they complemented our complexion and eye colors. After I picked out a few pieces, I paid full price, feeling it was deserving, especially since these pieces were obviously handmade. After paying, I thanked them once more, and the woman shouted something to the young girl, and she nodded to me and pointed further down the path. She said not to buy any figurines that claim to be ceramic. They're just fake and bring nothing but bad luck. I smiled and thanked her for the warning and walked away with my gifts. I knew about scams enough. No matter where you went, if you stood out as a tourist, you could typically find at least one person that may try to scam you out of something. I assumed that's what she was referring to. We continued down into the market, browsing as we went. I got stopped at one stall while my friend was at another nearby, always remaining within view. Once I finished up, I met up with my friend who had just bought a small figurine. It was of an elephant that looked like its trunk was holding up a small tray, maybe to use like a holder of some sort. But what I noticed was that it looked to be ceramic. I asked her about it, and she shrugged, saying she didn't know what it was made of, but she was obsessed with elephants, so she wanted it. I saw the two people at the stall talking to each other, and they would look back at us and smile. I asked her how much she paid for it, and that's when I knew. In my opinion, at least, she had been majorly ripped off. She paid close to $50 for it, but she wasn't bothered by it. I just told her that it was her money and told her what the old lady had told me previously. Once we were finished and worn out from the walking, we left and headed back to our hostel for the evening. The plan was to move on to Cambodia the following day, so we wanted to make sure everything was packed up and that we were well rested. But then, that night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept getting this feeling like we were being watched. I would roll over or sit up and look around the room, but there was clearly no one else around. I peeked behind the curtains, no one there. The door was locked and not open, and no one was in the bathroom, closet, or under the beds. I just chalked it up to me just being anxious. The next day we headed out with no issues, and were looking forward to more fun and adventure. But then, things seemed to just go downhill. First, the place that we planned on staying had no records of our reservation. It made no sense. We'd been charged for part of it, but I had no proof. I had a cell phone, but this was way before smartphones, so I didn't have any way of confirming the reservation. And no, I didn't print off proof, unfortunately. It didn't even cross my mind to need to do it. I did after this trip, that's for sure. Now, it wouldn't be so bad if we could just move on and pay for a room, but they said they had no vacancy either. So then we had to leave and try to find a new place. We went to a few places before we finally did find a place. It was just about our last resort. It was far from the place we had reserved, The door locked from the inside only and just had a sign on the door to say it was vacant or occupied. Relying on the honor system, I guess, that no one would go in the room they didn't pay for. We did our best to keep our valuables hidden, just in case, and took with us some things that we could. You don't want to carry a lot of stuff with you when you're walking or hiking because you never know what you might get into. Regardless, we did our best to be optimistic. We didn't want this to ruin our time, so after putting our items away, we headed out to explore. Big mistake. While out at the temple, I tripped over a tree root and severely hurt my ankle. By the time we got back to the room, my ankle was swollen, so we ended up spending the rest of the day in there. We did have a great dinner at the hostel we stayed at, though, which was nice. After a day of keeping my ankle up and iced, it seemed to go back to normal, so it didn't seem like I broke anything. But the next day, as we explored the area, a seemingly clear day was then hit with a hellacious storm. We had not brought an umbrella or raincoat of any sort, as we weren't expecting any rain. We were soaked, and there was damn near flooding in some areas, so a lot of places were closing to keep the water out. So, once again, we had to turn back to our room. But when we got to our room, we immediately saw something was wrong. The door was slightly open, and when we entered, some of the drawers and our bags were opened. My heart sank. We started looking through everything to assess the damage. The little backup cash we had been stolen, along with my friend's passport. It was risky taking our passports with us too, but I at least felt a little safer with it on me rather than leaving it in the room. I guess in that case I was right. We still had some cash on our persons and had the ability to pull out more cash if needed, but that was supposed to be as a backup in case something happened. Unfortunately, as we explained to the owner of the hostel as much as we could, they had no proof and no cameras to review. We were just stuck there, with less cash than when we started, and my friend without her passport. That was not something we could easily just go and get a replacement for. We had to go to the local police to report the theft, and they provided us with information on how to contact the embassy. Thankfully, they were able to help us out with getting a temporary travel document, because she at least had her driver's license and a student ID on her. However, it was going to take a few days for them to complete it. So, in the meantime, we tried to make the most of our time. We found another place to stay that at least had a locking room, so we felt a bit safer there. But the bad luck seemed to keep piling on. We went on another boat tour, but we were being watched by these 3 men the entire time. We were used to being stared at, and could deal with it. However, seeing others avoid us when they spotted the men really put me on edge. I told my friend that we needed to leave, and she agreed. We ended up leaving the boat tour when it made us stop, and got a ride back to a familiar and safe area. We tried to enjoy a meal and try some local favorites that were suggested to us, but after eating, we tried to do some shopping. And then my friend started feeling ill. She got bad enough that I had to help her walk back to our room where she became really sick. She was vomiting and fevering, and I was terrified. Was it just a bug, or could it be something worse? I gave her something to settle her stomach and kept her hydrated until she slept. I just sat inside and read, taking care of her. Thankfully, she was fine the next day, so maybe it was something she ate. We weren't really sure. But that next morning, while she was feeling better, she was on the verge of crying. She was talking about how everything just seemed to go downhill and she didn't feel safe. I tried calming her and explained that it was just a bout of bad luck and bad timing is all, and encouraged her that, once we got her pass, we could leave, and hopefully start anew in the next country that we visited. Thankfully, we got her pass the next day and headed to our next location. Our reservation was still there, and we got our room that was quite nice and much needed. We spent the day at their spa, really feeling optimistic, when I started breaking out in hives. That time, I did have to go to a hospital because it was starting to become painful. Turns out, I was having an allergic reaction to a soap that they used. I won't continue with all of our woes, but I'll just let you know that they did not stop there. We had multiple other things that happened to us, including being pickpocketed, and by then we were both feeling homesick. That's when it finally clicked for us. My friend once again mentioned bad luck, and I joked about her buying that stupid elephant, and reminded her of what the lady had said. We looked at each other with that, "you thinking what I'm thinking?" type of look, and we silently agreed on what needed to happen. We were skeptical, but being in a completely unfamiliar country and culture, we took her elephant to the small park-like area behind our hotel, sat it down on a pillar, thanked it for its company, and we left it there. We felt silly as we walked back to the hotel, but at the same time, I felt relieved. Even if it was just our mindset, I was feeling better about it. I'm not kidding when I say this, but from then on, things went back to normal. Better than normal. No more health scares for either of us. We went somewhere to eat, and someone invited us to a festival where we won some sort of contest they had. The prize was about $40. The days were clear, and we had a lot of fun. And get this, as we were leaving our hotel, we had to get a ride to the airport and then walked part of the way. As we walked, my friend spotted a small pink bag partially covered by dirt. When she went to inspect it, it was her makeup bag that had her cash and passport in it. Well, the cash was still gone, but her passport was still tucked into its pouch. How was it possible that we would find that bag that had been stolen in a completely different country? We got on the flight, feeling rejuvenated and like everything was back as it was, and we had no idea why. The only thing we kept coming up with was that it had to have had something to do with that little elephant, because nothing else makes sense. But if anyone has any suggestions or has heard of anything similar, I would love to hear about it. This way, I know what to avoid when we go back there on our planned trip in 2026. At 16, I was on a secluded Seychelles beach with my friends, far from civilization. The beach was isolated with no other people in sight, surrounded by dense tropical foliage and the sound of waves crashing gently against the shore. We were having the time of our lives, running around in the sand, playing games, and swimming in the warm, inviting ocean. As the night began to settle in, we gathered on the beach, still buzzing from our adventures. That's when we noticed the sky. The blood-red moon was hanging low and casting a mesmerizing glow over everything. It was an extraordinary sight, and we all settled down to take it in, our excitement still palpable from the day's activities. Suddenly, my friend, looking completely shocked, tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to her and she pointed up at the sky. My eyes drifted upwards, and to my utter disbelief, I saw a second moon on the opposite side of the sky. It looked just like the red one, round and glowing, but it was a normal white moon. The red moon began to move, drifting across the sky, and a nearby star seemed to follow it, as if it were being pulled by some unseen force. The red moon picked up speed, soaring rapidly upward into the dark expanse of space. We were frozen in place, fear creeping in as we realized we might be witnessing something we couldn't explain, maybe even a UFO. The excitement from earlier turned into a mix of awe and anxiety. We were left speechless, our minds racing with questions and worries. The whole experience felt like stepping into a sci-fi movie, leaving us both thrilled and unsettled as we tried to make sense of it all. Desperate for answers, we turned to the locals. They spoke in a mix of French and African language, which made it hard for me to understand everything they were saying, but I could make out that they believed it could be related to aliens. They also mentioned seeing strange things coming out of the ocean sometimes. Their casual attitude towards these bizarre occurrences only added to the surreal feeling of the night. What we saw remained a mystery, leaving us with more questions than answers, and a sense that perhaps the universe was far stranger than we had ever imagined. Since then, I've researched red moons and found that many people report seeing red orbs in the sky. But the one we saw was much larger, making our encounter even more puzzling. I, 32, female, have always had vivid dreams. I remember so many of them, and oftentimes I have control over my body and actions, and what I say in my dreams. The plot, not so much. I've dreamt full-blown conversations with people like my dad the week he passed away, or talks with my grandpa when I needed him in real life. I'm an indigenous woman. My tribe is native to the Dakotas. It is very common for me and my family to dream of our lost loved ones. I've had a great aunt tell me that I'm sensitive to these things. I've had some dreams that stick with me for years, where they aren't nightmares per se, but they seem like real-life stress dreams. I don't know if that's the best description, but for instance, I had my cousins over for a sleepover when I was 9 or so. I dreamt that I woke up in my body at that same moment, same night, and same clothes. And I could see my cousin sleeping next to me, and I look over at my arm and my side of the bed, and there are hundreds of ants crawling on me and the bed. Not chaotically like scary, but they're marching in lines straight from my head to the foot of the bed. I do scream, and as I wake up, I'm screaming and brushing and swatting them off of me. My aunt comes in and she's like, "What?" I say that my bed is covered in ants. My cousin jumps up and we're all looking and there's nothing there. I brushed it off and apologized, but I've never forgotten it. Until I found this podcast, I realized that I've downplayed a lot of stuff that's happened to me. The dream that has probably stuck with me the longest and makes me curious is when I was about 4 years old. I've thought about this dream maybe once a week since I was 4. I never reflected until now to wonder why that is, and I'm hoping maybe someone can tell me what it means. Preface: I'm over at my papa and grandma's house staying the night. It's bedtime. I think I was scared to sleep in the living room that night because my grandparents moved so often, like once a year, for various reasons. Military, medical, to help family, etc. So when they would move, I wouldn't know the house right away. I stuff myself between them for bed. I'm wearing a light pink nightgown and I've got my hair down, and I hate wearing socks to sleep, so I'm barefoot. All 3 of us are asleep. I wake up slightly, looking around the room. I forget where I'm at, so a panic attack happens a little bit, but seeing my grandparents, I relax immediately. I look around and all the walls are blank because they haven't unpacked yet, and we just have the bed set up and that's it. It's dawn and the sunlight is just starting to fill the room. I need to get up to use the bathroom, but I don't really feel like it either. The bathroom door is right across from the foot of the bed, but my grandparents were sleeping so soundly, and I didn't want to wake them. Insane self-awareness for this age now that I'm thinking about it. I close my eyes and decide to go back to sleep, and then I would wait for my grandma to get up. She normally gets up early anyways. I think that this is when that dream starts. I see myself float out of my own body, like a floating version of me leaves my physical body. I'm leaving my body and I do slow somersaults up into the air until I reach the far right corner of the ceiling. I felt my stomach turn and flip with each flip that I did. It was very uncomfortable, like the feeling of falling when it gets to your stomach. I look up to the ceiling and I'm absolutely terrified at what I see. Me, crouched in a spider-like position in the corner of the room. My whole body feels clammy and cold. The fear takes my breath away. My view changes, and now I'm looking down at me from the other position. I realize that I am me, and the girl in the corner is me, and now I am the girl in the corner. I start breathing again and my heart stops racing. I'm still confused. I just keep switching between views, almost like camera angles when you're watching a show, and the camera position changes. After probably several hours of doing this, I get tired again and decide it's time to get down from the ceiling. I start somersaulting back into my body slowly. My stomach feels like it's dropping over and over, and I can't take that feeling anymore. I get upset, as 4-year-olds do when they don't understand something irritating. I go to cry or scream because I want it to be over. I realize my scream made both of my grandparents jump awake. My grandma goes, "What's wrong?" And before I can say anything, she says, "Oh, you had a bad dream. It's okay, you're going to be alright." I never told anyone about this. To this day, I hate with everything in me that stomach-dropping feeling. I felt it in some of the worst moments of my life. Once when I was in an elevator that moved too fast, or one of the worst flights of my life where the turbulence was so bad that people were praying in their seats. I've fallen down 2 large flights of stairs. Twice when I was on a boat or a ship and there was a storm. And while being a passenger in cars that were going too fast or caught air or hit bumps. And several other dreams where I was flying, like my body was soaring, and me losing control and crashing. It'll be interesting to see what anyone else thinks about this. So that, my friends, was a collection of some unexplained stories. I did not put horror stories in the thumbnail of this one, because I didn't really think, well, I mean, they were scary, yes, but I didn't look at all of these as horror stories, just some chilling unexplained stories. Stories where it's like, that's chilling and not explained as to how or why it happened. So, chilling unexplained stories. I know the title thing is just me being a silly, pedantic little boy, but is what it is. Hopefully you all enjoyed this collection of chilling unexplained stories. In my opinion, they were good. They were kind of creepy, so they were good stories in my opinion, though, so I already said that. I'll say it again. They were good stories in my opinion. In my opinion, is the only one that matters. That's a straight up lie. That's very much a lie. Anyways, if you enjoyed the stories, please do hit the like button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. You can also leave me a comment if you're feeling bold. I'd love to read what you have to say. Love to reply to you. To have a dialogue if you so choose. And if not, that's totally okay. Please do hit the like button and the subscribe button, though. That'd be great. You can also join Patreon or membership to get early access to content like this. Do a super thanks, which is just a tip to the channel, never expected but always appreciated. Send your stories in to astheravendreams.com. And if you don't like to listen on YouTube, you can listen on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Audible, Pandora, pretty much anywhere where podcasts are. It's entirely up to you how you listen to the content. I just appreciate that all of you listen at all. Yes. So, all that said, friends, I hope that you have a gorgeous weekend. I hope I do see you again here very soon. But until then, remember that you are loved, that you are valid, that you are important, and you're the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.